What if the reason you keep failing to master a new skill, whether that's learning a language or picking up an instrument or, I don't know, mastering a new coding framework, has absolutely nothing to do with your actual discipline?
Right. Yeah.
Like, what if it has everything to do with the fact that you were just, trying way too hard?
I mean, it makes sense when you think about it. We have this really deeply culturally ingrained visual of what success is actually supposed to look like.
Oh, absolutely. It's the 3-hour study block, right? It's
like
sitting at that isolated library desk. It's just sheer exhausting force of will. But when you look at the actual neurological mechanics of how the human brain acquires new information.
Well, that grueling 3-hour marathon isn't just unnecessary. It's often biologically counterproductive.
Wait, really?
Yep.
Counterproductive?
Yeah, because it creates a massive friction point. We build up these towering monolithic expectations of what quote-unquote real work looks like.
Right.
And in doing so, we trigger our own biological defense mechanisms against cognitive strain. I mean, we're essentially scaring our brains away from the task before we even begin.
That is just wild to think about. So today, we are entirely dismantling that myth of the agonizing study session.
It's a fun one to tear down.
It really is. So welcome to the deep dive. We are pulling apart a fascinating concept today from a text called the Microhabit Method.
Specifically, 5 minutes to English mastery.
Right, yeah. And our mission today is to really extract the core insights from a segment of this material that deals with building a language habit.
But as we get into the actual architecture of this method, you'll see this is a blueprint for basically bypassing your brain's resistance to any complex task at all.
Definitely. I mean, we are looking at the philosophical battle between consistency and intensity, which is huge.
Oh, massive.
And the reality of, growth through action. Plus, we're going to examine all this through a highly practical scenario presented in the text involving two individuals, Bruce and Mia.
Because the stakes here, they're incredibly high. This isn't just about memorizing some vocabulary words, right?
Yeah, it's way bigger than that.
Exactly. It's about fundamentally rewiring our relationship with effort itself. It is about understanding the specific biological and psychological levers that turn this overwhelming, impossible goal into an automatic reality.
Okay, so let's jump right into the inciting incident of the source material. It presents us with an incredibly common roadblock.
I think we've all been here.
Oh, 100%. So we meet a character named Bruce, and Bruce delivers a complaint that is, well, it's practically the anthem of the modern professional.
Yeah, he says he wants to learn, but he simply has, quote-unquote, no time to study.
No time? I mean, this is a phrase we throw around constantly. Right?
Oh, all the time. But we really need to stop and decode what is actually happening when a person like Bruce says that.
Right, because is it actually about time?
Well, if we're completely honest, no time is very rarely a literal mathematical lack of available minutes in a 24-hour cycle.
Right, yeah. Unless someone is, working 3 back-to-back manual labor shifts just to survive, there are usually minutes available.
Precisely. So when Bruce says he has no time, he is expressing a psychological state. He's entirely overwhelmed by the perceived intensity required for the task.
Wait, so you're saying the no-time excuse is actually like a disguised defense mechanism against perceived pain?
Yes, exactly that. To understand this, we have to look at how the brain processes large, demanding tasks.
Okay, lay it on me.
So when Bruce thinks about studying English, his brain doesn't picture a lightweight, easy activity. It pictures a heady cognitive load.
Right, it pictures that 3-hour library session.
Exactly. And the brain is an energy-hogging organ. I mean, It uses about 20% of the body's energy despite being only 2% of its weight.
Wow, 20%. That's huge.
Right. So it is evolutionarily designed to conserve energy whenever possible.
Okay, that makes sense.
When Bruce visualizes a 3-hour intense study session, his amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, essentially flags this massive energy expenditure as a threat to his biological resources.
Oh, wow. So the brain literally views the 3-hour study block the same way it views, like, a physical threat. It just wants to run away from the exhaustion.
In metabolic sense, yes, absolutely. The friction is just too high.
That is fascinating.
Right, so Bruce looks at his mental energy reserves at the end of a long Tuesday, compares them to the massive mountain of effort he believes studying requires, and, well, his brain creates the easiest possible exit strategy to avoid spending that energy.
Which is saying, I have no time.
Exactly. Generates that rationalization.
Yeah.
By defining the task as this massive, immovable block of time, his definition of the task is what actually manufactures the lack of time.
Okay, let's unpack this paralysis of the ideal, because Bruce has this hyper-specific picture in his head of what a good student looks like.
Oh, definitely. The capital G, capital S good student.
Oh, yeah. The good student clears their schedule, sits in absolute silence, and dives into a state of, uninterrupted flow.
Right, which is impossible for most adults.
Exactly. Because Bruce looks at his chaotic, real-world schedule and realizes he cannot possibly engineer that flawless 3-hour block. He entirely disqualifies himself.
It's an all-or-nothing fallacy.
Yes, if I can't do it perfectly, I won't do it at all.
And by taking that stance, he basically outsources his failure to the clock. It completely protects his ego.
Oh, I see. So he doesn't have to admit that he lacks the mental endurance or the desire to start?
Right. He could just blame the structural reality of his schedule. The sheer anxiety of needing a large, unbroken block of time completely prevents even a microscopic amount of progress from occurring.
So he is trapped in a state of ego depletion before he even opens a book.
Exactly.
It's like someone claiming they have no time to exercise because they define exercise exclusively as driving to a gym, doing an intense 90-minute circuit, showering, and driving home.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah, they look at that 2-hour ordeal, feel entirely overwhelmed, and just stay on the couch. Meanwhile, they're completely ignoring the fact that they could just drop to the floor and do a 1-minute plank right there in the living room.
Right, because the plank doesn't require the commute, the athletic wear, or the massive energy spike. It just requires action.
Yeah.
Bruce is entirely focused on the commute to the gym of studying, the preparation, the isolation, the unbroken duration.
He thinks the environment is the work rather than the actual cognitive engagement with the material itself.
Precisely.
So if Bruce is paralyzing himself by imagining this grueling 3-hour marathon, the obvious question is how to break that paralysis without, sacrificing the goal.
Right. How do we dismantle the amygdala's threat response to learning?
Exactly. And that's
Okay.
exactly the intervention we see next in the source material, introducing the character of Mia.
Yeah, Mia serves as the catalyst for the entire paradigm shift in this text.
I love Mia's approach.
It's brilliant. When Bruce delivers his "I have no time" complaint, Mia does not tell him to overhaul his life.
Right. She doesn't do the standard productivity guru routine. She doesn't tell him to wake up at 4:30 in the morning and take an ice bath.
Thank goodness, right? No, she entirely avoids trying to stretch the fabric of his day.
So what does she do instead?
Instead, the text states, she shows him how to use the small gaps. This is a profound shift in resource management.
Small gaps. Okay. Explain that.
She moves his attention away from the blocked-out hours of his schedule and directs it toward the negative space.
Negative space, like an art.
Yeah, exactly like in architecture or art. The negative space is the empty space around and between the physical structures.
Okay, I'm tracking.
In time management, we call this interstitial time. It's the invisible transitionary moments between our scheduled events.
But let's be realistic about interstitial time for a second. We don't naturally perceive these gaps as useful.
No, not at all.
We are conditioned to look at our day in massive chunks, right? The morning commute, the 10 a.m. meeting, the lunch hour.
Yeah. We completely ignore the 3 minutes waiting for the microwave to ding, or the 5 minutes sitting in the driveway before walking into the house, or, the time spent standing in a checkout line.
Right, because the brain defaults to the path of least resistance during those transitions.
Meaning what, exactly?
When you hit a gap, your brain switches into the default mode network, or DMN. This is basically a resting state.
Okay.
And what do most people do to sedate themselves during these gaps?
Oh, I know this one. They pull out their phones.
Exactly. They scroll, they seek a low-friction dopamine hit to bridge the uncomfortable gap of waiting.
So we basically weaponize our screens to avoid the mild discomfort of empty time.
That's a great way to put it. What Mia is proposing is a revolutionary act of reclaiming that interstitial time.
Yeah.
She isn't just handing Bruce a philosophical concept. The source notes she actually shows him how to use these gaps, which implies a tactical integration into his existing routine.
So she is taking the dead time and converting it into active cognitive processing time.
Exactly right. Okay, I hear what you're saying about the gaps, but I have to push back on this on behalf of anyone who has ever tried to learn a complex subject.
Sure, go for it.
This sounds fantastic for reviewing basic flashcards, but how does this apply to deep, complex material?
It's a fair question.
I mean, you cannot learn the English subjunctive tense or complex syntax rules while you have 3 minutes waiting for a bus with traffic blaring in your ears. Isn't the brain too fragmented in those environments? Doesn't this entire method fall apart when the material gets highly technical?
So that is the exact trap of the good student mindset trying to sneak back in.
Wait, really? How so?
You are evaluating the gap based on its capacity for encoding complex new frameworks from scratch.
Oh.
And you're right. You wouldn't want to read a dense grammatical textbook on the subjunctive tense for the very first time while standing in line at the grocery store.
Right, that would be terrible.
However, language mastery, and honestly the mastery of any complex system, is not primarily about initial encoding. It is overwhelmingly about retrieval.
Okay, you need to distinguish those two for me. Encoding versus retrieval. What's the difference?
Sure. Encoding is the initial uploading of the information. You read the rule, you understand the concept.
Okay.
Retrieval is the act of forcing your brain to recall it and actually use it. And studies in cognitive psychology consistently show that active retrieval practice is far more effective for long-term retention than passive review.
So just trying to remember something is better than reading it again.
Exactly. When you utilize a 3-minute gap at the bus stop to try and mentally translate the billboard across the street or to recall the conjugation you looked at yesterday, you are engaging in high-friction retrieval.
And the chaos of the bus stop doesn't ruin that.
Actually, the chaotic environment acts as a form of interleaving and variable practice.
Wait, so the noise and the distraction of the bus stop actually help the learning process? That sounds crazy.
It does sound counterintuitive, but they force the brain to access the information under suboptimal conditions, which creates a stronger, more robust neural pathway.
Oh, wow.
Think about it. If you only ever study in a perfectly quiet room, your recall becomes context dependent on that quiet room.
Oh, I've had that happen. Like, you know the answers on the couch, but you freeze up on the test.
Yes. When you try to speak the language in a noisy restaurant, your brain struggles because the environmental cues from your quiet study room are missing.
That makes so much sense.
By practicing in the small, chaotic gaps of your real life, you are building a neural network that is resilient to real-world conditions.
That completely flips the script. You aren't just saving time. You are actively building a more durable memory by learning in the chaos.
Exactly. You're bulletproofing your knowledge.
But that still leaves the question of volume. You know, how much can you genuinely accomplish in a gap? The source gives us a highly specific, very small number right in the title.
Yeah, the title is The Micro-Habit Method. 5 minutes to English mastery.
5 minutes?
It establishes a non-negotiable baseline of 5 minutes a day.
Okay, let's dissect the word microhabit because, frankly, it almost sounds insulting to our ambition.
Insulting. How do you mean?
Well, when we set out to master a language, we want to be heroes, right? We want the grand transformation. Telling someone to do something for just 5 minutes sounds like a gimmick.
I see what you mean.
It sounds like those spam ads, you know? Learn quantum physics in 30 seconds a day.
Right, right. It feels paradoxical because we are culturally conditioned to link the value of an outcome to the sheer agony of the process.
Yes. If it doesn't hurt, it must not be working.
Exactly. But from a neurological standpoint, the prefix micro is doing an incredible amount of heavy lifting here.
Really? How?
It is a biological hack designed specifically to bypass the amygdala's threat response we discussed earlier.
So by shrinking the task, you neutralize the fear.
Exactly. We talked about how the brain resists massive energy expenditure, right? Well, 5 minutes requires almost zero activation energy.
Oh, I get it. It completely disarms your internal alarm system.
Yes. When your brain looks at a 5-minute commitment, it doesn't see a threat to its metabolic reserves. It says, fine, we can do 5 minutes.
So you basically slip the task past the brain's defensive walls before it even realizes it's doing work.
Precisely. So it's not actually about the 5 minutes of work. It's about reducing the friction of starting to an absolute zero.
The hardest part of any task is crossing the threshold from inaction to action, right?
Always. In physics, static friction, which is the force keeping an object at rest, is always higher than kinetic friction, which is the force resisting an object already in motion.
Okay, science class, I like it.
The microhabit lowers the static friction so drastically that failing to do the task actually creates more cognitive dissonance and psychological discomfort than just doing it.
That is fascinating. So it's harder to live with the guilt of skipping a measly 5-minute task than it is to just do the 5 minutes.
Exactly. You effectively trap yourself into success.
I love that. Trap yourself into success.
And it gets better. Once you cross that threshold, you trigger the Zeigarnik effect.
The Zeigarnik effect, what's that?
It's a psychological principle stating that people remember uncompleted or interrupted tasks better than completed tasks.
Really?
Yeah. So when you engage with a language for just 5 intense minutes and then stop, your brain doesn't just shut off.
Oh, it leaves a loop open.
Exactly. The task remains slightly open in your subconscious background processing. You might find yourself naturally thinking about the vocabulary word an hour later while doing the dishes because the brain is seeking closure.
Wow. So the 5 minutes acts as a catalyst for background learning throughout the rest of the day.
It really does.
But I want to really challenge the juxtaposition in that title. 5 minutes paired directly with mastery.
It's a bold claim.
It is. I understand how 5 minutes gets you to start, but how does a daily 5-minute drip actually architect the physical brain changes required for mastery?
That's the million-dollar question.
I mean, we're talking about rewiring thousands of neural connections. The source material answers this by highlighting a core philosophical shift, though.
Yes, the text explicitly states, quote, the power of consistency over intensity.
Consistency over intensity.
This is the central thesis of the entire methodology, and it represents 2 entirely different operating systems for human behavior and neurobiology.
Okay, let's draw a hard line between these two. Intensity is Bruce's ideal, right?
Yes.
It's the supernova of studying. It's staying up until 3 a.m. on a Sunday, chugging coffee, and cramming 100 vocabulary words into your head.
And biologically, intensity relies on a highly unstable cocktail of cortisol and adrenaline. It is literally a stress response.
So you are basically forcing the hippocampus to temporarily hold a massive amount of data.
Exactly.
And what happens to that data? Because, I mean, we've all crammed for a test, passed it, and then forgotten everything 3 days later.
Yeah, we've all been there. That happens because of how memory consolidation works.
Okay, explain that.
The hippocampus is like the brain's short-term sorting facility. When you flood it with data through an intense cram session, it holds the information temporarily.
Right.
But your brain is incredibly efficient. During sleep, it assesses what information is actually vital for your long-term survival.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Because that cram session was an isolated, highly stressful one-time event, the brain categorizes it as an anomaly.
It says, well, that was weird, but it's over now.
Right. It essentially says, we survived that weird stress event, but this information isn't a regular feature of our environment, so we don't need to keep it.
Wow.
It initiates synaptic pruning. The connections are literally dissolved.
So intensity is just building a sandcastle right at the tide line. It looks impressive for an hour, and then the brain just washes it away.
That is a brilliant way to picture it, yes. Precisely.
So contrast that with consistency.
Now, consistency is Mia's method. It is the quiet, relentless, daily 5-minute drip.
Okay.
When you expose the brain to a small piece of information every single day without fail, you are sending a radically different biological signal. You are triggering a process called long-term potentiation, or LTP.
Long-term potentiation. How does LTP work? Make that real for me.
Sure. Every time you retrieve that vocabulary word in your 5-minute gap, neurons fire.
Yeah.
When neurons fire together repeatedly, the synapses between them physically change. Calcium ions rush in, new receptors are built, and the connection becomes stronger and more efficient.
Like blazing a trail through a forest.
Exactly. By touching the material daily, you signal to the brain, hey, this information is a permanent, recurring feature of my environment. I need to wire this directly into the neocortex for permanent storage.
It makes me think about water carving stone.
Oh, that's a good one.
Like, if you take 1,000,000 gallons of water and drop it all at once in a massive flash flood, that's intensity, it washes over the rock, causes a lot of chaos, and disappears, leaving the rock fundamentally unchanged.
Exactly. It's just runoff.
But if you take that exact same volume of water and drip it continuously, day after day, year after year, that's consistency. It carves the Grand Canyon.
That is the exact mechanism of neuroplasticity. The brain does not reshape itself in response to massive, infrequent shocks. It reshapes itself in response to steady, continuous environmental demands. And from a purely behavioral standpoint, consistency bypasses the need for emotional fuel.
Oh, because intensity requires motivation? And motivation is notoriously unreliable.
Right. Motivation is a fair weather friend. It is an emotional state subject to how well you slept, your blood sugar levels, and, your stress at work.
So true.
You cannot build a long-term architectural project like language mastery on a foundation as unstable as your daily mood.
So what does consistency rely on instead?
Consistency relies on habit. Once a microhabit is established, it moves out of the prefrontal cortex, which is the area responsible for conscious decision-making and willpower, and into the basal ganglia, which handles automatic behaviors.
Oh, wow. So you literally move the task to a different part of the brain.
Exactly. You don't need to feel inspired to do your 5 minutes. You just execute it automatically, like brushing your teeth.
But surely intensity has some place, right? I mean, are we completely throwing out the deep focus session? If I have a free Saturday, shouldn't I do a 2-hour immersion?
Oh, intensity definitely has a place, but only as a stress test for the foundation built by consistency.
A stress test. Okay.
If you have been doing your 5 minutes every day for 6 months, an intense 2-hour immersion session will be highly valuable because you have an existing neural architecture to attach that new experience to.
Ah, I get it. The foundation is already there.
Right.
Yeah.
But intensity cannot build the foundation itself. The problem is people try to use intensity as the starting point, which inevitably leads to burnout.
Which perfectly transitions us to the final defining concept highlighted in the source material. We've talked about the gaps, the 5 minutes, and the consistency.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
But what is the actual mechanism of progress? The text gives us the phrase growth through action.
That specific word action is the absolute linchpin of the entire methodology. We have to separate action from its highly deceptive cousin, which is planning.
Oh man, this is the trap we all fall into. We confuse preparation with execution.
Exactly. When Bruce was paralyzed by his lack of a 3-hour block, he probably spent a lot of time thinking about studying.
Oh, for sure. He probably researched the best language apps, watched YouTube videos about polyglots, and color-coded a beautiful study schedule.
Right, because planning feels incredibly rewarding. It triggers a release of dopamine, the molecule of motivation and reward in the brain.
So you get the biochemical satisfaction of making progress without actually doing any of the difficult cognitive work.
Exactly. It's the illusion of competence.
It's like someone who wants to run a marathon, spending 6 weeks researching the aerodynamic properties of different running shoes, reading hundreds of reviews, building a spreadsheet.
Yep, they feel super productive.
But they haven't run a single mile. They feel accomplished, but zero actual growth has occurred.
Because growth only occurs when the organism encounters friction and adapts. The source emphasizes this by pointing out that Mia actually shows Bruce how to use the gaps.
Right. She doesn't give him a theoretical lecture.
No, she initiates an immediate shift from passive victimhood into active, tactile execution.
So why is that immediate action so critical for the learning loop?
Because of how the brain learns through prediction errors.
Prediction errors. Okay, break that down for me.
When you take an action, say, trying to recall a word in your 5-minute gap, your brain makes a prediction. If you get it right, you get a small dopamine hit, reinforcing the pathway.
And if you get it wrong?
If you get it wrong, you experience a negative prediction error. This signals to the brain that its current model of the world is inaccurate, which triggers neuroplasticity to fix the error.
Wow.
You cannot generate a prediction error through passive reading or planning. You must step into the arena and attempt the action.
So the mistakes made during action are literally the biological trigger for growth. That is so cool.
Without action, there is no feedback. Without feedback, there is no adaptation.
Yeah.
Growth through action also implies an inherently iterative process. The beauty of the microhabit is that it strips away the pressure of perfection.
Because you're only doing it for 5 minutes.
Exactly. You are not going to achieve flawless fluency in your very first 5-minute gap. The growth is entirely cumulative. It happens specifically because you are taking continuous, imperfect micro-actions.
Action breeds momentum. And momentum changes your identity, you know?
That's a great point.
When you do something every single day, even just for 5 minutes, you stop being someone trying to learn English and you become an English learner.
Exactly. The daily action provides undeniable evidence to your subconscious that you are the type of person who does this thing.
That identity shift is the ultimate goal. When the action becomes part of your identity, the need for willpower completely evaporates. You are no longer fighting yourself.
Yeah, their dream state right there.
So this is where I want to turn this directly to you, the listener, because we all have a little bit of Bruce's mindset lurking in our schedule.
Most definitely, we all do.
I want you to rigorously self-reflect for a moment. Identify your own Bruce tendencies. Where in your professional or personal life are you currently stalling out on a meaningful goal?
It could be anything.
Right. Is it Learning that language, writing that book proposal, getting your financial portfolio in order, or learning that new piece of software? Where are you sitting on the sidelines, weaponizing the excuse of no time?
Simply because you are stubbornly waiting for a perfect, idyllic, uninterrupted 3-hour block of inspiration to strike.
Exactly. Where are you letting the fantasy of a perfect, massive effort prevent you from taking a messy, highly effective 5-minute action right now?
It is a profound and sometimes uncomfortable realization when you discover that your lack of progress has never been due to a lack of time.
Yeah.
It has always been a misallocation of your minimum effective dose of effort. You've been trying to force a flash flood when you should have been letting the water drip.
That flash flood analogy really sticks. All right, let's bring all of this architectural brain science back down to earth and synthesize what we've covered today.
Sounds good.
We started by completely deconstructing Bruce's paralyzing myth, the biological defense mechanism that disguises our dread of massive cognitive load as a simple lack of hours in the day.
We then explored Mia's highly tactical paradigm shift. She completely bypassed the unwinnable battle for more hours and instead taught Bruce to harvest the negative space.
Right, those interstitial gaps where our brains usually default to mindless phone-scrolling sedation.
From there, we looked at the sheer neurological genius of shrinking an intimidating mountain of a task down to a 5-minute micro-habit.
Yeah, we saw how this completely bypasses the amygdala's threat response, lowers the static friction of starting to absolute zero,
And triggers the Zeigarnik effect to keep the brain working in the background.
which brought us to the core biological reality that quiet daily consistency will always triumph over loud, unsustainable intensity.
Because while intensity floods the short-term memory and leads to synaptic pruning, consistency triggers long-term potentiation.
Right, physically carving new, durable neural pathways into the neocortex, just like the canyon.
And finally, we arrived at the inescapable truth of growth through action.
The understanding that true mastery is never the result of passive planning or waiting for ideal conditions.
It is the biological reward of generating prediction errors through small, relentless, imperfect steps in the present moment.
It is a complete revolution in how we approach the acquisition of complex skills, and it is entirely accessible through the minutes you are currently throwing away.
It really is that simple, though it's not always easy.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. We spent this entire time applying these mechanisms to English mastery and the specific dynamics of Bruce and Mia.
But the implications of neuroplasticity and microhabits reach far beyond a single linguistic goal.
Exactly. So think about this. If a deeply ambitious, highly complex, neurologically demanding goal, like mastering a foreign language, can be successfully dismantled, integrated, and completely conquered within the hidden, invisible 5-minute gaps of your everyday routine, well, what other seemingly impossible life goal are you currently abandoning, simply because you haven't yet bothered to look for the gaps?
That's the real question.
Until next time, stop waiting for the flood and start the drip.